Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Roger Martin is back, this time talking about what an incredible impact that making a promise to the customer can have on your business. We get into what a brand promise is, what is branding, and how it relates to the promise to the customer. What's the USP? How does it relate to strategy and playing to win? This is a great episode. I'm sure you're going to love it.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Joining me today, welcome back, Roger. It's great to have you back on the show.
It was fun last time. So when you called again, I said, sure, let's do this thing.
I was all the way back in episode 6. We're at almost, I think this is episode 39 now. So we're chugging along, but that was great. So for anybody that hasn't heard episode 6, that was a conversation with Roger on his new book called, A New Way to Think.
A New Way to Think.
Yeah.
It must have been for that
one.
Yeah,
A New Way to Think. And so it was a fantastic show. I just love a lot of your work. And today we're talking about the promise to the customer, which is a new piece of research that you've come out with in collaboration with the B2B Institute, right? And WARC.
B2B Institute at LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yes. A fellow named Jan Schwartz and a woman named Mimi Turner there. And then WARC, the World Advertising Research Council.
Right. And then, so just as a brief intro, you are widely regarded as one of the top management thinkers of our time. You're an advisor to CEO for companies like P&G, Lego, Verizon, Ford. As we talked about, you have the new book called A New Way to Think, but you've also written 11 other books, I think.
12, actually.
12. Funny, because I was trying to find different sources, and there was one that said 13 and one that said...
Who knows? It is. That was my 13th, though. And it went well.
Oh, that's amazing.
It went well. It wasn't an unlucky 13. So I've burst through the 13 number.
Integrative thinking is also a fascinating area that you've written on. Design thinking and design for business is another interesting area. Playing to Win, one of my favorite books. You're, in general, prolific contributor to HBR. You've got a weekly blog on Medium, which is also fantastic. A professor emeritus and former dean at U of T's Rotman School of Management.
But I was really happy. I just broke through 200,000 followers on Medium this week.
Amazing.
Earlier this week. So it's kind of fun. I just started writing on it and didn't know what would happen, and it's turned out to have been viewed as helpful to people. So I've got that, and that puts me in the top 10 or maybe 15 Medium writers. So it's been a joy to do this.
That's great. I notice a number of the things you've been writing about lately are comparing the Playing to Win to some other strategic framework, which is also super helpful because it's oftentimes there's a lot of different models that get presented, and it's somewhat challenging from a normal person's perspective to try and stitch these things together, because oftentimes you think they're all competing.
Yes.
So I kind of actually hope we can talk about that today with Playing to Win. With Promise to the Customer.
Sure. Happy to, and happy to do that, and it's been in response to readers. Like, I listen very carefully to readers. If they ask me a good question, I respond, and they say, "Well, how does this relate, Roger, to jobs to be done? How does this relate to blue ocean strategy, etc." And so, and people seem to like them. They read them a lot, and so I just keep on doing them.
Yeah. So, Roger, in terms of the promise to the customer, I think just about any executive would say, we want to gain a competitive advantage. We're looking for ways to improve our financial results from the things we're investing in. And so the collaboration that you did with WARC and with the LinkedIn B2B Institute on the promise to the customer, I thought maybe we could just begin with the end in mind. So if you could just tell me, or tell Via and I and our listeners, what were the landmark results of this report that you guys created?
Well, the result, which was stunning to me in how big the magnitude of the result was, is that if your ad campaign, your messaging to the customer, contains an explicit promise to the customer, it will dramatically outperform, and I mean dramatically outperform, ad copy that doesn't contain a promise to the customer. So when Snickers promises that it will satisfy, right? Snickers satisfies. That is kind of much, much more successful than Under Armour saying it's unlike any, or Guinness saying it's made of more. Those are very company centric. It's we're this, and as opposed to this is what we will do for you. 15% will 15 minutes will save you 15% progressive. That's more of a promise than Nationwide is on your side or you're in good hands, right? Those are more about the company and are less about you. They aren't completely that spectrum. I'm fascinated by it. It's Progressive, Nationwide, Allstate, right? They're in the same kind of business, appealing to the same customers. And if you just judge those on the basis of to what extent is it a clear, unambiguous, direct, non-elliptical promise to the customer, Geico is just so much clearer. And so that was the fundamental result. All companies have and design a brand promise of some sort. So the brand promises of Guinness made of more, or Under Armour unlike any, or Oracle driven by data. They all are a brand promise, but those promises sort of, I think the research, I'm speculating a little bit on this, but I think the research says those kind of go kind of over the head of the recipient, so they don't have a big impact. Whereas the ones that sort of say it's about you, right? It's not about us and how fantastic we are. We're not building a smarter planet, kind of we're like IBM. We're building a smarter planet. Oh, isn't that nice of you? That doesn't appeal to the consumer like Sixt, the car rental company. Don't rent a car, rent the car. We will promise you the very car you set saying, not at the last minute you get there and say, oh, well, we don't have any, I don't know what mid-size luxury SUVs, but you can have this, right? Sixt says, no, it's going to be the car. And so that seems to have a dramatically bigger impact, positive impact, than these lofty, here's what we're about. We're fantastic. You should like us because we're fantastic. Customers are sort of saying,
I don't know if you would know the number, but is there, in the research that you found in the methodology you guys did, is it a small number or a small percentage of companies that actually make a promise in comparison to the number of brands you looked at?
Well, I'll give you the numbers and then you can decide whether it's small or big. 40%. So it was a 2,000 plus of like 2021 campaigns that our research work assessed. And essentially 800-ish were promised to the customer ads and 1,200 were not. So it's the minority. Okay. It's not like nobody does it, right? By any stretch. Lots of companies do it. But it isn't the majority. And that's to me fascinating, right? Because the ad business has been around for a long time, running campaigns. They think about all these things. And it is quite apparent that nobody has taken note of the fact that some promises are more powerful than others. And a promise about you, the company, is meh, and a promise to you, the customer is motivating. And the interesting thing of this, Mark, for me at least, is we've just peeled one layer of the onion.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually don't in this first tranche of research, because when you do, it's like peeling an onion. You do the first piece of research and you figure out, oh my goodness, this is pretty amazing, and then you can ask questions like, is there a difference in the quality of promises to the customer?
Yeah.
Did they actually fulfill the promise to the customer?
Yeah.
Like think about this. This is all it is. It's promise to the customer, whether unfulfilled or not, whether a really great one or not, and they still dramatically outperform. And so we're going to go back into the 800, right? To now study more. What are the attributes of promises that are killer promises versus ones that are good? They're better than not a promise to the customer by far, but they could be even better. And then the harder research to do, and that's going to take a long time, is to really say, if you make a powerful promise to the customer and religiously fulfill it, is that the gigantic, enormous win? And that would be our hypothesis at this point.
Do you, again, based on the research, Roger, and again, welcome from my side as well.
Thanks, Pete.
Do you believe that this really benefits more of the larger brands, or do you feel like the smaller companies, smaller brands can also really lean into this?
The answer is an unequivocal yes. And this is actually, for what it's worth, it's fun to have a research team, and Mimi Turner was super interested in that. Does this only work for like big money, long campaigns? And interestingly, the promise to the customer versus non-promise to the customer differential is bigger in smaller, shorter campaigns. Wow. So it's more like, it is hard to break through the clutter, and Byron Sharp is right about almost everything he says, right, which is already being big and prominent is the best indicator of being bigger and more prominent. So there is sort of this advantage to being a big, prominent brand plopped down in the center of a market.
Right.
You can eat into that as a little brand, a littler brand that doesn't have as much in the way of resources, by ensuring that you make a promise to the customer.
Sure.
Even if it's a lower budget, shorter running campaign, the effect is dramatic.
As you're saying that, it made me think of, I think it was AVIS that a long time ago said, "We try harder." And that was their sort of, I don't know if that is technically the promise, but they were the smaller brand. They're the challenger brand trying to take on, I think it was Hertz at the time that might've been the biggest, but.
Yep. Hertz was number one. AVIS was a distant number two. Yeah. And it's famous, but it wouldn't pass our promise to the customer. It would be a brand promise. We as a company try harder. But what does that mean for you?
Right.
That these things aren't evident until you kind of like do the research. So it wasn't evident to me the degree to which and again, some of these is speculation. We're going to have to try and figure this out. But my belief, based on what I see in these campaigns and what kind of brand promises were promises about me, we try harder, right? What I believe doesn't happen, right, is that campaign doesn't create a connection to you
as the individual.
You're listening to it and you say, "Oh, well, that's nice that they try harder."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's good. I'm happy that they try harder. That's nice. So I don't think it means it's going to be unsuccessful as a campaign. But if National is saying, you, Mark, can have any car in the aisle, when you come, you just pick your own car, right? That's a promise to you. Or Sixt is even more powerful. You don't have to worry about what's going to be in the emerald aisle if you're at National. You just specify exactly the car you want, and it's there for you. Right. We promise. what that does, I think, is just create this connection with you. It's sort of like, okay, now we're connected. You've promised me this. I've promised that I will pay you for that, and I'll rent the car. So I've promised you something. You've promised me something. Now let's see if we fulfill our promises. I show up for the car. You give me the car, the car, not a car, and then we're closer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that then knits us together where we're in a relationship, right? Even if it's not a deep relationship with your rental car company, but we're in a relationship where AVIS trying harder, I think, has a less impactful impact on our relationship,
right?
And it's hard to audit. Harder than what? Harder than what exactly? What feature of trying harder would impact me? How could I tell if you're trying harder?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah.
So I wouldn't, even though we try harder, is relatively famous.
Mm-hmm.
I would now that I've done this research, I would never advise a company to have a campaign like we try harder.
There definitely is we'll definitely get into what makes a good promise. But I just wanted to ask about the research in terms of, and like, I heard Mimi actually doing a presentation, and she was talking about the rigor that you put this through. So just in terms of the research itself, like, is there any chance that there's confirmation bias in the reporting, or not the reporting, but in the sample sets itself?
I don't think so, and so it's WARC has a database of campaigns of ad campaigns that have submitted themselves to competitions, including their own. Because they as you probably know, they run the Lions, which is sort of the biggest, sort of the Oscars of advertising. But they have collect from other competitions, and so they just take those submissions, because in all these competitions you have to submit all sorts of performance statistics in order to win. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty, like, it's not a random sample of campaigns, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably a sample from the upper tail of the distribution, right? Because they thought enough of themselves to submit to a campaign. I don't think that really kind of queers the data, if we can say that. But then the confirmation bias, I just don't think is there, because WARC did not know our hypothesis. Right? So we just said, we want you to make an evaluation of these along these criteria. Does this make a promise, a recognizable promise to the customer or not? So I think if Mimi would have done the evaluation, you could say there could be a bias. But we had a third party who understand, the researchers there understand, everything about their database and about advertising, whatever. So I think we were using expert folks who were not aware of the hypothesis. Now, they could have inferred it, and they could have said, but I mean, we just, all we had going in was a hypothesis. I've always had this belief, right, that I've preached this notion to my customers, B2B and B2C, right, to say, it's great to have a brand. What is a brand? And in my view, a brand is the result of a loop where you make a promise, you fulfill the promise, you make a promise, you fulfill a promise, you fulfill, until they stop thinking at all about whether their promise is going to be fulfilled. Then you have a thing called a brand, which is something over and above the sort of the physical characteristics of your product or service, right? It's this thing that's over and above, right? And so you stop asking the question, will FedEx actually pick up my package and deliver it when they said so? Right? like before FedEx came into existence, that was a profound question. So some courier company sends a truck and picks up your package. They hand it off to American or United or Delta to put in their cargo, and then they hand it off to some unaffiliated delivery company on the other end. And good luck to you. And so you got to ship it, 7 days in advance to have a hope of them losing it and then refinding it and getting it there. Mm-hmm. But then FedEx says, no, here's the deal. When it absolutely positively has to be there, call us, our own trucks, our own planes, flying out of our own airports to our own trucks. And you can track it the entire way through because at everything, every instance in the process, it gets scanned. And so you just sort of stop thinking about their promise because it's so obviously going to be fulfilled. And then you pay a substantial price premium, right? That's a brand. That's what I've always thought. And so in talking to Jan, because Jan's interest was is sort of upgrading the quality and attention to branding in B2B. And I've always believed it, even though I'm known kind of as a B2C guy because of Procter & Gamble, it's sort of a little false in that half of my client base is always B2B as it is currently, right? Right. And so in the conversation with Jan, I was saying, listen, you get to have a brand as a B2B company when you fulfill your promises until such time as they assume that they're going to be fulfilled. And we said, why don't we test that? Why don't we just figure out whether that is actually more true than not, Roger? So I had a bias, sure, but I didn't do any. I didn't get anywhere close to the data set. But that's how it came about. It's something I've always believed, and in my work I've preached, but even so, had no idea how big the impact would be from the ad copy.
I'm curious, Roger, as you were going through that thought process, and I think it's interesting because when I first went through the research myself, I'm kind of like, well, don't brands naturally make promises? But you talked about AVIS, and I think that's a great example where even though it was a very successful campaign, it's still not actually a promise in terms of what it's making to the consumer. So I think I'm starting to see that
it's what V, if I can just sorry to interrupt, but to say we've come, like we started talking about it as this is promise to the customer, etc. And we've now come to say we should just make this distinction. It's brand promise versus customer promise. Right. And so AVIS makes a brand promise. And that's why, because some advertising people say, well, of course we make promises, right? We promise something about our brand. Guinness, made of more. Under Armour, unlike any, right? Oracle, driven by data, right? These are promises. What are you talking about, Roger? And so it's that distinction. I think virtually all ad campaigns make a promise. It's just, what is the nature of the promise? Is it a promise about the brand, or is it a promise to the customer? So sorry to interrupt. No. But that's sort of learning along the way for us, actually.
No, I think that's a fantastic delineation between the two, because I think it's easy for a lot of people, marketers, to see like, you're right. Well, we're all making promises, but saying that one's a brand promise versus one's a consumer promise, I think is great. Now, the one problem I see potentially with all this is you have a lot of companies, they usually cycle their brand anthems. I don't know, every 3 years, they'll come up with a new tagline and whatnot. As you were going through this process and the research, is there like is there time bound at all, or the ones that are consistent with their messaging for longer are able to build more of that, I guess like the mental availability? Or have you seen something that would suggest that you can do it within a couple of years and it's more than enough?
Again, that's an onion peel we haven't gotten to yet, but it's a really good one, and I have a very strong bias and hypothesis on that, which is like I'm a big habit guy, mental availability habit guy, and I think there is an aspect of the ad agency world that I just hate, and that is this need to change stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, we need a refresh of our campaign, and changing. One of my great bête noirs in life is logo changes.
Yeah.
I still clench my fists in anger whenever I see the not even new anymore. It's 10 years old Holiday Inn kind of logo, which just violates everything I felt about Holiday Inn growing up. It's like, what is this? What is this crap? So I think the same for ad campaigns. It's like a new CEO comes in and they hire their favorite ad agency, and their ad agency says, "Oh, well, this is old and tired, and so we've got to go in an entirely new direction," and that's stupid.
Yeah,
right? It's stupid and destructive. Now, I think what we'll find is having a theme that changes somewhat is good, right? So Snickers satisfies is no longer their main campaign. Remember, it's Betty White. You're not you when you're hungry. Have a Snickers.
Yeah.
Right.
I like that because it builds directly on Snickers satisfies, and then has a nice twist on it, right? Which says, here's the problem that you have when you're hungry. You're a football player who plays like 98-year-old Betty White, but all you have to do is take this and you'll be fine. It doesn't say the word Snickers satisfies, but everybody knows what they mean by that, and it is a promise. So staying on the same promise, I think what we're going to find is staying on the same promise vector and doubling down on that will aid this mental availability and my notion of you've stopped thinking about it.
Right.
You just know that they are going to fulfill their promise to you. You will be back to you when you had the Snickers, and that's what we're gonna find. And I think some companies, Coke. If you look at all the campaigns, I like to teach the world a thing, or have a Coke and a smile. There's this long history of different manifestations of Coke. It will be a happy making social experience, right? And so that's now ingrained. And if they did something that's off that vector, right, I think it would be destructive to the brand, not additive. And it wouldn't be fresh and new. It would be, fresh and stupid, right? So that's what I bet that, right? But I'm not certain of that.
No, great.
There's a couple of things that were just floating in my head. One of them, though, is that you did say that this is one of the biggest discoveries you've made in your career as far as models go. And maybe just talk about that, because you've done a lot. And you've done a lot of really important things. And so I'm curious why you say that about this model.
Well, it's what I said is it most striking research, right? So most striking research result. So I would say there's other things that maybe concepts and the like that I came up with that maybe I think are more important or the like than this. But this one, when it came back the way it did, you could have knocked me over with a feather. It's just like, wow. Now, maybe I shouldn't have said wow, is because I've been sort of preaching this all along, but there's lots of things that I believe to be the case on the basis of more qualitative data, if you will. So I've worked for 10 CEOs, and they all talk about and complain about the same one thing. I say, well, that's a problem in general. And then I tell it to other CEOs, and they like nod and say, yeah, you're right, Roger. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. So lots of my work ends up I see patterns. It's pattern recognition that is non-statistically significant, quantitative. Some stuff, kind of for sure is right. This is right up there with the other one that I've put in the same category. This was in 1989-90 when I did this piece of research for Procter & Gamble on their retail channel, because they sell everything through retailers, right? And the dominant merchandising strategy of retailers in that era was, and it still is probably the biggest, is what called high-low, right? Which is you normally have your price of a given product at high, but then you put it on deal, right? You got a sale on Neutrogena products or something. That's called high-low. And Procter & Gamble was entirely set up to support that. They'd work out with all their customers, when are these products going to be on deal, and they'd gear up their factories to produce more when it's on deal, and they'd have all these rules about you can only sell it on deal at this periods and that periods. An entire business system set up to support that. And I did this study that said, what if we segment our customers not on the basis of are they a mass merch, a grocery chain, or a drugstore or a C-store, but rather segment them on the basis of their merchandising strategy. Because there was a new and emerging one called EDLP, everyday low prices. We're not going to have sales. We're just going to sell it the same kind of every day, which Walmart was then emerging, still a small company, but emerging. But a bunch of others actually were pursuing that strategy as well. And I came to the conclusion from the data that wow, high-low, the store growth in high-low merchandising, like were they opening stores, was zero. This was across our top 100 customers. Zero. They were flat. Their sales per store were zero real sales per store. Meanwhile, in EDLP, they were growing number of stores. So store opening is at 7% compound a year. And their sales growth was 7% compound real, both 7 and 7. So 7 versus 0, 7 versus 0. And we were being kind of annoying to them. We'd say, listen, we're going to sell it to you at a higher price sometimes and lower price when it's on deal. And if you want to sell it for the same thing, you go knock yourself out. And they were like, this is stupid. Why? Okay, can't we just buy it at the same time, same price every day of the year, and it works with our supply chain much better? No, you can't. Was what we told them. And so what I said is, we are siding. The data was so clear. We are siding with the losers, right? Who are losing share to the winners, who we are pissing off, basically. And that created a complete shift. Procter & Gamble in 1991-92 shifted to say our base is EDLP. And if you want to do high-low, you knock yourself out. We'll give you all the same amount of trade dollars to do whatever you want in EDLP versus high-low. And we're going to set up our whole logistics system to do that. We're going to stop arranging deals for you guys, because that's all up to you. And Procter & Gamble grew faster during the 90s than all of its competitors, who took too long to figure that out. And that's how Walmart and Target, for example, became our absolute giant customers. So it's been since 1990 that I've had something that's as dramatic. So 32 years as a dramatic, a quantitative research finding as that.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And actually, you brought up Walmart, which is a great example. The everyday low prices is a promise to the consumer, right? It's not a brand promise in that instance.
Yes.
So I could see how that then.
And Sam Walton's original promise, which I've always loved, is we help regular folks afford the things that usually only rich folks can.
Yeah.
Don't you love it? Don't you love it?
Yeah, it's very clear.
Right? That's
Yeah.
a promise. If you're regular folk, we help you buy things like rich folks can. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful promise.
I want to dig into it's a good jumping point into the next sort of section as far as, so there's the research, but then there's the applying the research. And when it comes to the promise, I mean, you mentioned this before, we were talking about this with AVIS. And so there's a brand promise versus promise to the customer. And that part was really interesting because it's this, I think, in the specificity of the language, or it's the promise to the customer, not just a brand promise, which has this sort of loose feel to it. Can you maybe talk about what makes a good promise to the customer?
Well, we've come to the conclusion that it's at least 3 features. It might end up being more, but these are the 3 that we see. One, it's memorable, right? That you can remember it, and that ad people would say, "Duh, obviously, Roger. That's why we test unaided recall and stuff like that." But I think the promise itself has to be memorable. It has to stick in your mind as kind of mattering enough to you that it is memorable. And that's, again, why, not to beat up on the companies so much, but when adidas says, original is never finished.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? And how is it that's going to be so memorable? Oh, wow. Original is never finished. It's like right over your head and out the window.
Yeah.
15 minutes could save you 15% memorable, I think, because it's straightforward, simple, and it's stated in a nice way. Snickers satisfies that. That is I like one of the ad campaigns in the thing I really liked. I'd never heard because I don't live in the UK, but it was for a UK business, British Telecom, for their enterprise market, which is unbreakable Wi-Fi, all business, no drama. I like that, right? Because when your Wi-Fi goes out as a business, that's very bad. Yeah. It's drama of the sort you don't want, and sort of I like that. So memorable. It's got to be valuable, right? So if you make a promise that customers don't care about, then good luck to you. And I think there's going to be a back and forth interplay between memorable and valuable. If something sounds like, wow, I'd like that. Wow, I just got my bill from whatever Allstate or whoever, and it was $2,000, and they say 15 minutes could save me 15%. Oh, that would be $300. Ooh, that's valuable, and that, I think, helps make it memorable. But this is where you really do need to understand your customer and what you could uniquely deliver to them. And that gets to the third one. It's deliverable, right? You can actually deliver that. So making a promise that's hard to deliver on, right? Nationwide is on your side. Does that mean if you're a fraudster and you're trying to get them to fix the thing that used to be broken already, but got broken some more when you had a crash, will always be on your side, right? I don't think so. I think what the promise is when we think it's right to be on your side, we'll be on your side, and otherwise we won't. Well, saying Nationwide is on your side, is that deliverable?
Yeah,
don't know. Is it auditable? And I think sort of kind of it being auditable is important, and that's where Snickers satisfies. Like, what is not to like, right?
Yeah,
it's simple and memorable. It's valuable. When you're hungry, you'd like to be satisfied. And when have you eaten a Snicker bar and not? If you were hungry and eat a Snicker bar, are you not hungry? It's like, duh, super, super easy for you to deliver. Like, you create a bar that is full of sugar, and it fills you up, and it's big, and it fills you up. It's nougat. It's not super expensive chocolate, so it's little, and it might not fill you up as much as a big hunk of nougat that's chock-a-block full of sugar and nuts and chocolate. Boom, you got it.
Yeah. We had a question here and I think I know the answer now. It was around, how does this differ potentially from a unique selling point and brand purpose? But I think earlier you talked about, a brand promise versus consumer promise. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that, to kind of create more of that delineation between the two?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you need a USP, something that differentiates you. The question here is then how do you communicate that?
Yeah.
Right. Like IBM may have invested kind of bajillions into Watson so that they can kind of build a smarter planet. But what does that mean? Yeah. What, V, if you're an IT guy, right, with a big budget in a company, and they say, our promise is we build a smarter planet. I mean, that may be unique, and it may be sort of a selling proposition of some sort, but it's just so elliptical. Like I think of things as going on this big elliptical curve rather than straight to your heart. Because if somebody wanted to argue with me, they could claim that every single brand promise that I dismiss is actually a customer promise, and I think they could successfully make that argument.
Yeah,
but I would say yes, if that customer is willing to go through 25 steps of logic to figure out how you could make an argumentation, how that gets back to them. And I'd rather just go one step. Snickers satisfies.
Sure. Yeah.
Not kind of Snickers. We make really healthy, or not healthy, filling bars that taste great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could say that's a customer promise. Yeah. They're filling and they taste great, but it's just more elliptical than Snickers satisfies you, V.
Yeah.
You're on, and we're going to show you eating one and not looking like Betty White again, right? looking back to your old self, which I like. I think the Betty White one is fantastic.
It's so smart.
It's fantastic because it's bad to good, right?
Yeah.
And what got you from bad to good? Eating, and they do show the person taking a bite of the bar. So I would say it's how it's a lot about how you frame and communicate that, and there's a real kind of ego narcissism problem here, right? Which is and I was at a meeting. I've worked with Procter & Gamble forever. I have all these friends at Procter & Gamble, and because of that, I gave them a preview. I was in a meeting with one of their big global billion-dollar brands, and I said, I'm going to Cannes in a couple of weeks. I'll give you the preview. Here's the deck. It was not even completely kind of finished deck, but I'll give you the deck. And there was sort of consensus in the room immediately, which is like, oh my God, we had a super successful 2017 ad campaign, like super successful. It really moved the needle on this product. And then we had 21 that was really kind of disappointing. Like it just didn't sing. And now we're in advanced copy testing, latest stage for 2023, and it's testing really well. So we're feeling better about it than 2021.
Right.
And they said, let's flip up those commercials, and they all have them on their computers. So they show 17, and it makes a crystal clear customer a promise, like super clear and compelling and valuable. And it even gives in the ad copy a little signal of how you can audit it at the end.
Oh, interesting.
You'll kind of know this if you do this. Kind of cool. 21, they had launched a new version of the product that they were super, super pleased with. And they should have been, because it was a super kind of advance on the product. And the ad was all about how super this new product is. Right. And then in 2023, they'd interestingly gone back to 17 and kind of mimicked that and gone back to a real promise. And sure enough, it was testing quite well. But they were all like, oh my God, we were so keen on ourselves in 2021 that we had to brag about how great awesome this was. And it fell flat, even though it was awesome. You could say, I think you could say definitively that the 21 product, relative to competition in 21, because the industry advances, but relative to competition in 21, the 21 product was better than the 17 product relative to the competition then, and the ad fell flat. But the other cool thing that they did, and this is what I love about Procter, man, when they get something in their teeth, they just go do it. They said, we dropped the audit feature. We didn't tell them how you should audit this. And they went back and they said, we're gonna fix the ad before we go, because we're still in testing. We're gonna fix it to add that back in. So it was interesting to maybe the most sophisticated advertiser on the face of the planet, the biggest advertiser, very, very, very sophisticated. They could immediately see that, oh my goodness, we went from promise to the customer to brand promise, now back to promise to the customer.
Right.
We gotta watch that. So the sector, they have six sector group global presidents, and she said, boy, we've just got to make sure this is a criteria now. We can't let things happen like 2021. That was a preventable error. Except we didn't have this frame in our head at the time, and so
it almost becomes like a litmus test now.
Yeah.
That's what I argue. Like, this is all coming out in an HBR article in Jan Feb. So it's in fact, I just signed off on the last edit. So it'll be there, and that's one of the points we make in the end of the article is if you're the head of a business and your CMO comes to you with an ad campaign and wants approval for the 200 million or the 50,000, whatever it is to spend on it. These are the questions you got to be asking of the campaign. Does it make a clear promise to the customer? Is it memorable, valuable, deliverable? Can they audit it to make sure we've delivered? And if it's not, I just say you're foolish to go forward with that campaign when you could make it a promise to the customer campaign. So I agree, V. It should be a litmus test, and I'm sure for the sector president, I'm sure it'll be a litmus test for her, right? Because she was just sort of like, oh my. Now she wasn't in charge of it; she just become in charge of it in the past 18 months. But she just looked at it and said, "Oops, missed that one."
Stands out to me that it's also like in that scenario where you're just talking about the P&G case study. I mean, that's a real time case study of like the application of this instantly being applicable. And it feels
I
like
didn't have to, Mark, I did not have to convince them of anything.
Right. They're just doing it.
They put up the 3 commercials and did the complete diagnosis and said, "Oh my God!" So it was interesting. I didn't have to say, "Well, did you notice in this ad that it was like they were like shaking their heads saying, how did we do that? And it was, and their diagnosis was sort of narcissism a little bit. Like it's like we were so excited about how awesome we were.
Yeah, there's 2 things that I was just thinking about. One is that it's a one way, and I'm not saying this about the P&G team, but it's one way that you can prevent your own team from putting lipstick on a pig.
Yep. Yes.
And then the other part is thinking about the connection to playing to win. The deliverable part, like I keep thinking about Sixt. And so you can make a promise if you want, so lipstick on a pig, but pick the car. But if you can't deliver it, then it means like the systems and process, so it extends far beyond just the marketing team making something up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
No,
the
you
whole
make
system.
you make an awesome point, and this, for what it's worth, is actually the obsession of Jan, Jan Schwartz, right? Is because his view from his vantage point is that sort of the go to market of companies, and especially he focuses on B2B, but I would argue it applies to B2C as all fragmented and fractionated. You know, that the salespeople do this and the marketing people do that, and the product people do this, and it's not easily integrated. And his argument, which I buy entirely, is that is in significant part because there isn't sort of a organizing theme. So they're all kind of doing their thing. And so he believes promise to the customer can be this organizing theme that would pull those people together. And Sixt is actually, you know, he actually knows somebody at Sixt, and so it was in mind when we were doing this. It's wow, they're making a promise to the customer, the car, but at Sixt, right? They have to have a whole bunch of different systems than the other rental car companies have, and make different decisions than those, because the other rental car companies, right, for fleet management, right, it's so much easier to say you'll get one of 7 cars in that class, and so they just, as cars come into and go out, they're like, oh yeah, as long as we have enough in that class, it'll all be fine. Sixt has to have a system, right, that says, you know, we're going to forego some of those benefits of fleet flexibility because we're making this promise, and we have to have a system that ensures that car is going to be there, because and they're not even okay with they think it's failing the brand promise if you say, yes, I want a whatever 5 Series BMW or an M5 or BMW. They're not even comfortable saying, I'm sorry, sir, we don't have the 5 Series. We'll give you for no extra dollars the 7 Series, right? Because they say they may not want a bigger car, right? They want the 5 Series, and that's why they booked the 5 Series. And so a whole bunch of their back end operational systems have to be different than the other car companies. The algorithms for kind of, you know, moving cars around, all of that stuff has to be different in order for them to fulfill the promise.
Right.
I mean, I remember this reminds me, like, as I go back in my long consulting career, I was doing Formica versus Wilsonart in high pressure laminate, right? You know, the desk that I'm sitting at is high pressure laminate, kitchen countertops or whatever. And Wilsonart kind of defeated Formica, even though people call high pressure laminate Formica. It's like they call tissues Kleenex, right? They overtook them in market share, and they did it because availability of exactly your shade and shade texture, whatever, meant a whole lot to the contractors who were building out your kitchen. And if you went into Formica, the answer was often that'll be 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. We can get it to you. And the reason is there are many Formica dealers in every town. Each of them carries a narrow range of only the most used kind of colors, because they can't afford to carry the long tail, because they're competing with all sorts of other Formica things. And Formica has like one DC for the entire country at that time. They may have 2 or 3 now, maybe one for the West Coast, and so you have to order from the DC, etc. Wilsonart was making a promise to the customer: 48 hours. It'll be on your job site, delivered in 48 hours. We promise. What did they have to do? One Wilsonart dealer per metropolitan area.
Right.
One, right? Why? Because you could say, we've given you Philadelphia, but you have to carry this range.
Everything.
You can't just cherry pick and carry a narrow range because you're Philadelphia. So a completely different distributor system, and then a set of regional warehouses that enabled the regional warehouses that had everything they produced in them, and they could get a material out. And they promised. They said to the distributors, even if you don't have it in stock, essentially tell them it's in stock. And even if it takes a Wilsonart truck carrying one sheet of this, like freight-logically insane, we will make sure, we will guarantee to you, our distributor, we will guarantee it will be in their job site in 48 hours, regardless of what we have to do. So they had to have truck availability and logistics availability to do that, so they could do what? Make a promise to the customer and always fulfill it.
Right.
And so I did that 30 years ago. Now in the context of this, I can see it's a great example. Yeah. We will make a promise to the customer that's valuable. 48 hours, that is valuable. It's auditable. It's like FedEx.
Yeah.
It's the sheet of high pressure laminate on my site or not. That is dead easy, but you make it deliverable by completely changing your distribution system and completely changing the makeup and structure of your distributors, all behind a promise to the customer. Was it useful? Yeah. They went from new entrant to largest in the business, dethroning the company that invented the product category.
Right.
Hadn't thought of that story before right now.
That's interesting. But as you're talking about it, it's fascinating because I think maybe going back to V's question about time, it's possible that like the companies that were submitting this feel good about their results because they've had the time to build up their systems and processes and can make a promise that they can deliver on. Whereas the Formica example that you were just talking about, the competitor there, they're making a promise, and I'm curious, as you dig more into this, I can't help but think there's going to be a pulling away of market share, as you just talked about, so that you're starting to make a promise early, but as your systems and processes go to support that promise over the months, years, quarters, decades, that it takes to, actually fine tune the systems and processes, that it will help accentuate that promise and help differentiate the company from other people because they've now aligned their promise with their actual delivery.
I agree more. I agree. I should say I agree entirely. And this is, in fact, was kind of the subject of an article AG and I did, an HBR article on where we said customer loyalty is overrated. It's more about habit. And we introduced the concept of cumulative advantage, how you can accumulate your advantage by having more interactions with the customers. And so that fits into what you're saying, Mark, which is you get a benefit of figuring out how to deliver the promise to the customer. You figure out better and better how to do it. They start to just take it as second nature, right? Like, send the contractor into the Wilsonart distributor because it'll be in stock, right? Like you don't even go to Formica. And interesting enough, what we found in that business is that the contractors had to train the designers. Because Formica did try to differentiate on the basis of having this broadest line possible, and they kept adding and adding and adding it, right? Which made the 6 weeks up to 8 weeks, right? As they complicated their system. And then the designers would spec Formica, then the contractor would go to Formica and they'd say 8 weeks. And the contractor would go back to the designer and say, would you knock it off?
Right.
You keep specking Formica because you think that fuchsia is just so perfect, right? And I don't care because I can't get it for 8 weeks, and we got to do the kitchen in the next 2 weeks. So knock it off. So they actually, what happened in the cumulative advantage is the contractors, who are the ones on the firing line, increasingly said, Formica doesn't deliver, Wilsonart delivers,
Yeah.
and I'm going to tell the other people to get with the program. So that sort of deepened the advantage. So it's a good, it's an example of what you're talking about, Mark.
It's from a measurement perspective. Are there key performance indicators that you should be looking at? Make sure that that you do have the right promise, or in fact that it is working. Of course, we can quickly say, well, revenue should be coming in at a higher rate potentially, and things like. But are there other lagging indicators that organizations should be looking at?
Yes, or more leading indicators,
yes.
I would say. Things that will cause you to believe that the sales will arrive. There, I think the industry is actually set up well. Like they measure consideration and purchase intent and preference and all those things. I mean, I think they're good metrics. Sure. One of the counterintuitive things that we discovered in this is one metric that people use is social media buzz. Did this campaign get social media buzz?
Yeah.
Did we get people talking about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that one dimension that the non-promise to the customer campaigns handily beat promise to the customer campaigns on is social media buzz. Like I think it's 55% to 43% delivered a big boost. So 55% of non-PTTC campaigns delivered on social media buzz win versus 43% of the promise to the customer. Mm-hmm. But then on all the things that matter, like did you actually sell more of this stuff? Did you build brand? Where did you build purchase intent? Blah 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 blah. All of those things. Mm-hmm. Promise to the customer slaughters non-PTTC. So it
interesting
is a real warning. Like it's a real warning.
Yeah.
I think lots of ad agencies are all into, well, if we can only get social media buzz, right? We could get lots of social media buzz if we sent some Bud Light cans to Dylan Mulvaney. Yeah, lots of social media buzz, right? So it's like we got to be controversial. And we'll get buzz. That was negatively correlated with real performance. So that is something I'd say watch out for, and think about it. Like, I think making a promise to the customer is kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
Snickers satisfies you is not newsworthy. 15 minutes could save you 15% is not newsworthy. Why would, who cares, right? Well, it turns out that customers buying insurance care, but not the media, not social influencers, whatever. So being careful not to be carried away by the idea of we've got to make sure that there's this huge buzz in the social media world with this campaign, and that will naturally lead to more sales. No, it won't. Is it? And that's it was sort of, I think, I'd have to think about this, but probably the most striking thing, the fact that it was exactly the opposite. Right? Mm-hmm. It was one area where non-PTTC campaigns, like on a metric, slaughtered PTTC campaigns. Sure. Right?
That's crazy.
And they had a slight win on whether it was evaluated as the campaign having had an influential idea, which would be sort of like a milder form of social media buzz. So this idea that you've got to have this really cool campaign that breaks boundaries and does all sorts of new things. Yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out. But if you actually want to sell more stuff, like maybe not.
That's something else.
That.
I know we only have a couple minutes left with you, Roger. So I just wanted, if there's one thing that like a CMO or a leader could take away from this and apply it today, is there something that you can like distill as like a first starting point?
Yeah, I would literally say, so if I were talking to a CMO, I would say, whenever you're considering a campaign or ad copy or whatever, put yourself in the position of the target audience, the target customer, and ask yourself, do I feel I was promised? Right. It's just as simple as that. So transport yourself to them. Get out of your now corporate mindset where you might have the narcissism of, well, this is so new. This is so great. We got to tell them about this great new thing that's so great. Like that'll get out by sort of almost role playing, flip over to the other side and role play the customer and ask that one question. Have I been promised something? Mm-hmm. And then if the answer is yes, is it valuable to me? Mm-hmm. You'd want that answer to be yes too. Mm-hmm. And then you'd ask, how will I figure out whether that promise has been fulfilled? And if they're confused as heck about that, then it's going to be a weaker promise. So just ask those, put yourself in their position and ask those three questions. Look at your ad copy, your ad campaign. Is there a promise for me? For me? Mm-hmm. Do I like that? Could I figure out whether it's been fulfilled? Mm-hmm. If the answers are yes, boom, go do it. If the answers to any one of the three are no, then I'd say it's time for you to do a little bit of rework.
I love this.
It can be better.
It's so simple. It's so simple. And
I like simple things.
Yeah, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
Where to play, how to win. Think of what I'm most known for. Where to play, how to win. How complex is that? Yeah. It isn't. It's simple. The most good things in the world of strategy and business are not complicated.
Yeah.
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 Is there more to come with the framework?
Lots.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
What we have to do is, and I talked a little bit about it earlier, is we've got to figure out more about how can you judge the quality of a promise holistically. Like we should be able to have a criteria that said this promise is a better one than this in your situation. So we've got to do more research work on that for sure. And I'm kind of interested in does that change a lot contextually, right? Right? Do you need to make different promises at different, if you want to do Byron Sharp category entry points, so to get more of a, if you will, a taxonomy of promises, so that it's really actionable. It's sort of like, okay, we're trying to get consideration here. What kind of promise do we make for that? Oh, we're trying to close it. What kind of promise do we make there? So it's that kind of peeling of the onion that's coming next, and we're actually right now in discussions with WARC on another piece of work, delving into the 808 promise to the customer kind of ads. We're going to forget the 1200 and say bye bye. Yeah, but the 800 we would like to dive into it. So
amazing.
Look for more to come, and I had a great conversation yesterday with a cool ad agency, and so there's lots of people reaching out and are interested in, and I think one thing that's in the back of my mind is sort of building some kind of a coalition of a bunch of interested people in the CMOs that are interesting in whatever to have a real kind of practitioner base of folks that would help guide where we go with this as a collective, because it's for the betterment of research in general.
We'd love to be a part of that coalition.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Roger, how could people find out more about you?
Well, I have a website that's just www.rogerlmartin.com. My middle name is Lloyd, and if you put rogermartin.com, it'll be a very nice real estate agent in Houston who has to funnel things to my way. I've sent him a bunch of signed books and everything. He couldn't be a nicer guy, but just to be nice to him, please put the L in. And I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. But the thing, if you like my work, the biggest manifestation of it these days is my Medium column. I write every week a Playing to Win Practitioner Insights piece. I'm 44 weeks into year 3. and it's approaching 4 books worth.
Jesus.
So Playing to Win was 67,000 words, and I'm at something in excess. I think it's 260,000 words now. So, and it's my most current thinking. The way to get what I'm thinking about this week. That's where you find it. If you don't want to pay the $50 a year that you have to pay to Medium to be on the platform, you can just go to my website. There's a tab that because the great thing about Medium, I'll push Medium here. The great thing about them is they take no intellectual property grab. It's your IP, and it's perfectly fine for me to put links on my site. So there's the entire list of them is on my site, and so you don't even have to go to be a Medium member to just click on them and you get them. So that would be Mark. That would actually be my number one recommendation. Now is that's my latest thinking in it, and it will evolve every week.
That's incredible.
It's fantastic. Thanks so much, Roger. This is great having you back on the show, and we just really appreciate your time. And
not at all. You guys are always fun to talk to. I appreciate the interaction. That makes a difference. I get asked to do lots and lots and lots of podcasts, and I do not go back and do second ones of the ones that aren't intellectually engaging for me and the other people, because life's too short. So you do a really nice job, and so I was happy to be back.
That means a lot. Genuinely, that means a lot, Roger. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Not at all.
Yeah, that does.
All right, gentlemen, I must go.
And now the post pod with V and Mark.
1, 2, 3,
4. Is it me?
V. Here we go. You go.
Post pod time.
That was so anticlimactic.
That one fell flat on its face.
Okay, let's try this again. It's the
We can do
post
better.
pod.
Look at
What's
that.
another way to
You're
say
really
that?
leaning into your radio voice.
Yeah, I'm going to
What's
get
that?
the really deep voice. I should have drank
There you
whiskey
go.
or something last night.
It's the post
Just what
pod.
With V and Mark.
All right. Post pod with Roger Martin. Roger L. Martin.
Roger Hellmartin, be careful. It's a great gentleman from what we know. Roger Martin, I guess the real estate agent out in Houston. Shout out to Roger Martin in Houston.
Yeah.
Probably won't be listening to this podcast, but that's okay.
Probably not. So Roger Martin and Playing to Win. Why did I do that again? It's not.
Well, you love playing to win.
I do
which
love
is
playing to win.
fantastic.
The promise to the customer.
Yeah.
You know why? Because in my head I see PT, and then I just fill in the blanks with Playing to Win, but it's PTTC.
Yeah.
Promise to the customer.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Well, I think you and I talked about this, and there was a part of me that was a little bit skeptical because I felt like this just seems like a brand purpose. It kind of seems like, I would argue sometimes it's a promise, and it's one of those things where I think I came in not completely sold on this framework, but as we started, talking to Roger a little bit and digging deep. And I think what really did it for me was the delineation between brand promise versus a consumer promise. And
Right.
what they're measuring is the consumer promise that brands are making. I
Right.
think that for me is like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
And, the AVIS example was also another really strong, example of where it applies and how it doesn't apply, say, in that state. So even though AVIS's Try Harder was a fantastic campaign for the brand name itself, it is an internalization of what they want to do to deliver on potentially a promise. But it wasn't like outward facing. It's the consumer would see the outcome of them trying harder, but it's not making a promise to the consumer in the traditional sense, or at least the way Roger was speaking about it. But I think it's maybe that one's probably more of a gray line too, because one would argue maybe there is a consumer facing component to that, because by you trying harder, it means that my service is going to go up. So even though it may take you a few steps to get to that, what he called logical pathway, it's still quite concise versus some other ones where it's just a far stretch.
Yeah. For me, like, and I think I mentioned this, although I was having so much lag, I'm not sure what, like my computer was lagging so much. I'm not sure what I said that actually got recorded, but it's really the specificity of the language. I think that, and it's so clear, promise to the customer. It literally means a promise to the customer, not the brand promise, not an aspiration. No. And I think that's where marketing speak turns into that gobbledygook, where you've got
I love that,
so much. So there's just so many like things that get mixed up, like USP and brand promise and all those kinds of things that are brand purpose and mission, vision, value, like, and all that stuff kind of gets mashed together. Yeah, positioning and all, like, whereas promise to the customer, to my way of thinking now, because it's so specific, it's an outwardly facing message that literally makes a promise to the customer. Yeah. And so as a filter, now I'm thinking about it that way, it's so much clearer because the promise to the customer has to matter to them. Yeah. And then you have to be able to deliver it. And that helps, I think, a lot of the marketing messages we're putting in, and I think can help. I think we talked about this a little bit too. Just get rid of the junk that we put out there in terms of like, oh, we're also green, or we're also totally, environmentally conscious, or we're, whatever the latest fad is. Yeah. In terms of marketing, we do that too. Like, it's not that. It's, I think, bold in a lot of ways because you have to promise something.
Man, I even love the way you kind of talked about when you think about the promise and, the 3 steps that he had, saying like, make sure that it's memorable to kind of create that stickiness. And he talked about make sure that it's valuable then to the consumer. So making sure you're putting yourself in the consumer's seat and then being able to deliver. Now, deliver is so important here because it affects the entire organization. And that was like your whole comment back to Roger is like, if you're not set up to deliver against the promise, then the promise falls flat. But this affects everything from, head office right down to your front lines and your ability to deliver against that promise, which is also a way to kind of bring an organization together. So if you're internalizing and you're saying, here we go, we want to become, well, let's just use, he kept using Snickers, like we satisfy, right? How do you deliver against that oh my gosh.
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction. I was satisfaction. I'm like, that can't be right. Anyways, satisfaction. Jesus. It's 8 o'clock.
Still early. My brain wasn't firing either before.
But it's, how do you continuously do that? So it means you're not tweaking the recipe potentially. And that essentially goes right down to, the production line for packaging. Making sure that it's easy to open potentially. Like, I don't know all the nuances, obviously, in that sector, but you can see how immediately it starts permeating other areas of the business. And I think that's the important distinction here: is any promise you come up shouldn't become in isolation of just marketing thinking of a promise. It's you have to almost pressure test that promise against the business and their ability to potentially deliver against it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. There's, you've heard of this, I'm sure, before. There's that classic line from John Kennedy about we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back. And often that's referred to as like, great brand promise or whatever. But now I think it's actually a promise to the customer.
And the dude. We're going to bring you back. And the guy. Put the guy on the moon and we're going to bring him back.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. I was literally thinking like the dude from The Big Lebowski. I'm like, he said that? It's the rug, man. It really ties the whole room together. Yeah. The guy going up in the rocket. Yeah, that dude. Yeah,
that dude.
It is a promise to him. Yeah,
totally.
But it's. I think And I don't know, it'd be interesting to run that through. I think that fits the criteria, but it's also
100%.
one of those things where you can see like how that promise is or that statement is a promise to the American public and to the dude. But then it also has to be delivered by everybody that was a part of making the ship, and making sure the rockets work and making sure that the parachute works and making like all those things, right? And there's that famous line about the guy who's the sweeper, and he said, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Like that was also an important part of the job. Totally.
And I think that's what makes this framework so simple to adapt and use. Like, and I know at the end that we're asking like, hey, where's this framework going? But you have more than enough right now as a marketer to take this and start pressure testing all your communications that are coming out of the department.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Is it memorable? Are you actually making that promise to the consumer? And I think because it is so simple, I can't forget this now. Like it's done. It's now ingrained in my head as a way for me pressure test or challenge or push back internally to anybody to say, yeah, this is cool. You're making a brand promise, but you're not making a consumer promise. Mm-hmm. Is that what we want? Yeah. It's not saying that it won't be successful, but do you really want to, swing for the fences here? Why don't we, make sure that it's rooted in a deep consumer need, and we're essentially answering the bell or answering the call in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we keep coming back to this comment, or at least I do. I think you do too, but it's so much about understanding the customer. That's like, you have to know what's valuable to them in order to make a promise that's going to be memorable. Because if it's something they don't care about, they're never going to remember it.
No. Isn't it funny how simple it all is at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Put the consumer at the center of everything that you do. Being able to cater to their needs, not your needs, their needs.
Yeah.
And, put messaging or craft messaging in a way that, really resonates with the consumer or delivers and able to deliver against a promise that you're making. It just, and I love his P&G example as well, where he talked about, they realized, between 2017 and 2021.
Oh, sorry, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's just, oh my gosh, this is where we missed it, you know? And it's such an easy test to do.
Yeah.
You must, I don't know. And I'm sure like you're going to have some really brand focused marketers are going to be, it's the same. They'll lean on, say, the AVIS example, which was extremely successful for them. And I think that one's a little bit of a gray line, like I mentioned earlier, that, you have to make sure you are putting the brand first because that's what you stand for.
Yeah.
Because let's think about Apple. Think different, probably the longest standing, is that a promise to the customer? No.
Weirdly enough, I was just looking at Apple ads yesterday over time.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's Think Different. That was one. Here's to the Crazy Ones.
Here's to the Crazy Ones.
And then there's a few others. There's like in Mac, right after Here's to the Crazy Ones, they went from we're going to be a computer, that's pretty much all they were at the time, was we're going to be a computer for creatives.
Yeah.
To we're a computer for everyone. We're the un-PC. So then they had this un-PC campaign. Yeah. That they ran for a while. So that in my mind was like, it may actually fit into that promise to the customer. And then they did the Mac versus PC for however long they did.
That was a long campaign. It was a good one too.
Yeah. Or 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
With the iPod release.
Yeah.
I mean, those are promises. Yeah. And you can check them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
The one thing I was thinking about as like, there's all kinds of conversation right now about with Ritson and Byron Sharp, and all that kind of stuff. Right now, the debate on differentiation versus distinctiveness, and so I actually started thinking about that when we were talking to Roger about promise to the customer, because in the case of Formica versus the Wilsonart that he gave us.
Mm-hmm.
Wilsonart saying we're going to get the stuff to you in 48 hours on your job site. Formica saying 6 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I think that's where that, what do you call it? It's not cumulative advantage. What did you call it again?
Isn't it?
Maybe it is cumulative advantage.
I think so.
I just keep referring to, I have like economics stuff in my head. Comparative advantage. That was the economics one. Cumulative advantage. Yeah, it's like compounding interest, right?
Yeah.
On a promise like this. So to me, I was thinking about differentiation in terms of that, because like you can say anything, and a lot of companies aren't really, the products and services they offer aren't totally differentiated. But in that particular case, I could see how that would become a point of differentiation that matters to the customer. They have the same products, but it's the way they deliver the products.
Yeah.
That at first, if they don't have the right systems in terms of delivery or inventory management or inventory assortment, all that kind of stuff, it probably doesn't mean anything to people. But over time, and I thought that was such a good question that you asked me, over time, I think that's where you potentially can differentiate yourselves on something that customers care about, because it's harder to copy the systems than it is like the product.
Totally.
In a lot of ways.
And for me, there's another very clear example that kind of really comes up, that, the Prime product that Amazon has.
Yeah.
It delivers it against the promise that we're going to get it to you a lot quicker if you don't use Prime, right? So it kind of gives you, I'm willing to pay that membership fee now,
right?
What was it, the $5 a month, to take advantage of that. So, when I think about that, like, is Amazon a top brand for me? Not really, but if I need something quick, I know I can get same day shipping, or at least within a couple of days, I have the product. It's a big differentiator than me trying to source it somewhere else to try to get the same thing. So for their ability to repeatedly deliver against that promise continuously, now for me has become this top of mind service. Anytime I need something, I'm going to probably first go to Amazon, see if they have it available, because I know I can get it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Before I start looking outside of that. So I think their ability to deliver against that is an example of, again, a promise to the customer.
Yeah, it's a great point. And actually, like, we think of Amazon Prime that way. Like, it's almost shocking now when it doesn't show up in a day, or even sometimes within hours of ordering it.
Totally.
Like, what's taking them so long?
What's going on?
But we act like it was always that way.
Yeah.
We forget that this has probably been, I don't know how long they've been around exactly, but 30-ish years of Amazon trying to figure out logistics and making the whole system better.
Totally.
And now, we just don't remember the world that didn't exist.
No.
Yeah.
I ordered a thumb drive, flash drive, call it whatever you want, and I had it within 8 hours.
That's wild.
It's like, how?
Yeah.
Now we can talk about packaging and how they actually deliver it, and you're like, this box was not needed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I'm as a consumer, I'm super appreciative on how quickly they got, because even if I wanted to go drive to a Best Buy and try to, like, it's just quicker, just deliver it to my house. I don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Actually, and speaking of which, that's also like, just thought another example. That was it FedEx, when it absolutely has to be there overnight, or UPS, I can't remember which one it is.
Well, I think they both have overnight, but FedEx.
But there was like a campaign where that was the message of the campaign, when it absolutely has to be there overnight. Use whatever. I guess it's not FedEx. Memorable enough, or maybe that's memory decay right there. Not because I'm losing my mind, but I think just because memory decays.
Well, I think that's an example where then there's other services that are able to deliver against that now. So now, is it just FedEx, or now it's UPS, it's Purolator. It's like all of these that could potentially do that for you. But I think it was FedEx. I'm fairly certain it was FedEx that kind of really came out with it. When you really need it, lean on us.
I think you also brought up this point too, or maybe it was Roger, and this is bad memory.
Memory decay.
We're losing so much about my early onset Alzheimer's. But there's that notion that, and we've talked about this with other guests, but that when a new VP of marketing shows up, or a CMO or whatever, or new agency, you're like, we need to refresh. Roger mentioned this. We need to refresh everything.
Yeah.
And then they like throw out the old thing. He brought it up with the Holiday Inn example for the logo. I mean, the logo is pretty extreme, but even just the messaging.
Totally.
To refresh that, like, then you're starting from scratch all over again, unless you're building on that same brand promise. Maybe that's where brand promise helps.
Maybe, yeah.
Because then you can iterate off the brand promise and make maybe a new promise to the customer, but it's still risky, I think.
Like, here's another example. Like, again, all of these were popping in my head during our conversation, but like, let's use our shared experience, Sport Check. You know, when we worked there, we were there for the initial launch, essentially, of Your Better Starts Here.
Right.
Then it moved into Find What Moves You.
Right.
Which of the two do you think is a lot closer to making a consumer promise?
Your brand
they're still kind of
Your Better Starts Here, I would say, is a stronger brand promise.
And I would argue the performance that we had over those 3 to 4 years with that brand anthem, and based on what we know, outperformed anything that we did subsequently. You know, around the Find What Moves You. The Find What Moves You is probably a lot closer to maybe a promise that you're making, more of a brand
like
promise.
An internal promise,
Exactly. And I think, can you correlate just that as being why, you know, there wasn't that continued success? Maybe it's not all of it, but it could be a leading indicator. So I'm really taking this framework now to heart, because I think we talked about how simple it is, you know, to really kind of pressure test. But I think more importantly, it should always be rooted back to identifying and promising as a consumer need. And
totally.
I kept thinking about like that empty seat in the boardroom. That's the consumer in the meeting with you. Yeah. You know, it's all of that, and making sure you're genuinely customer centric for everything from your strategies right to your messaging. And I think it almost seems like it's coming full circle a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's unifying. It's not something marketing does.
No.
It's something that the company does. And marketing is just promoting the thing that the company will do for a customer.
Totally.
But everybody has to work together to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's
this is a great
way to put it. Like, a strong brand, a strong consumer promise should unify an entire organization to deliver against that promise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Okay, V, this is awesome.
This is great. Great. Thank you, Roger, once again. 3rd time on the podcast, and we're eternally grateful for your time. So thank you.
Before you go, we'd love a review. If you've got a chance to take a minute or two and leave us a review, give us some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. We really want to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that. Thank you.